Hello and welcome to JPost Debate. I'm Sam Sokol, the Jewish World Correspondent. With me today is Lahav Harkov, the Knesset reporter, and Mati Wagner, the editorial page editor. As the war in Gaza continues, there are questions being raised by both sides of the conflict as to the fairness and tenor of the media coverage. The question that we have to address today is, what are the limitations of media coverage in a conflict zone, and how can they be overcome?
Over the weeks since the operation in Gaza began, more and more limitations on reporters have come to light. At first it was merely intimidation to not give reporters access to things like rocket launches and to Hamas command posts like in the Shifa hospital. The press conferences were held there and statements to the press, but the press wasn't allowed to go in and see where Hamas was operating from within the hospital. Over time, Hamas itself began to admit that they were going to do all sorts of things that would be considered intimidating to the press. Essentially, they were going to make a blacklist of reporters and their Palestinian sources. They asked all foreign reporters coming into Gaza to give lists of the residents of Gaza who were going to help them, what's called fixers. And that puts those people under threat.
The Gaza Strip is controlled by what's, like I said, a totalitarian reactionary Islamic regime that has no problems shooting the kneecaps of Fatah activists for daring to say that the Hamas should accept some sort of ceasefire, for instance, which happened just a few weeks ago, and which a lot of Palestinians have been very upset about. Just Friday, 18 supposed collaborators were murdered in the streets while dozens of men and boys cheered it on and seemed very happy about the whole thing. That's the type of society in which the news people that are operating in Gaza are operating. That's the situation that they're operating under. It's a very difficult situation. So they're obviously in constant fear, I'm assuming. You have situations like there was an Indian TV crew, for instance, that showed specifically how Hamas was using civilian areas to cover for its rocket shooting, and purposely putting these rockets in civilian areas. You do see that occasionally, but it's difficult. It's very difficult because you're working in a very difficult situation.
Is there a media bias in coverage of the Gaza conflict? And if so, in which direction?
Is the media biased? That's kind of a general question, but depends. I mean, you have to take a breakdown of the media. You'd have to look at, if you look at Fox TV, for instance, for the Fox network, then obviously it's biased. It's biased in favor of Israel to a certain extent, or at least, if you're pro-Israel, then you'd say that it's objective. There are other news outlets in the United States that are not quite as pro-Israel. There's been a lot of criticism of CNN, for instance, as though CNN is biased against Israel, not bringing the whole context of the conflict, not showing what Hamas's objectives are, not showing that it's this violent reactionary, totalitarian regime that's trying to destroy Israel and has nothing to do whatsoever with occupation or any other type of idea, and that its entire society is mobilized towards that one goal, destroying Israel. So that kind of context is missing in a lot of the news coverage of what's going on in Gaza. That's true.
Mati, what can you tell me about the limits under which foreign correspondents are operating in Gaza vis-a-vis Hamas? Are people coming under threat? And if so, are editors required to place a disclaimer on articles stating that their reporters are operating under certain restraints?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not only the editors who have a responsibility. I think that the reporters, part of the reporting should be letting their readers know that they were given a very restricted point of view, that what they saw was only a part of what was going on in Gaza Strip. If they were contained in one area, if they were not allowed to move freely around Gaza Strip, if their fixers were intimidated, if they were intimidated, etc., then all this should come out in the reporting. It's the obligation of the reporter, first and foremost, and not just the editor, to make clear in his reporting that that's what's going on in Gaza. That's essential. It's in the ABCs of reporting.
Lahav, why do you believe that foreign reporters have been using the numbers for casualties provided by the by the Hamas health ministry in Gaza, and what does this say about the tenor of media coverage?
I think that, Hamas is the only ones giving, I guess, detailed numbers. The IDF waits to do research, and it takes time, and we have a 24-hour news cycle, and people want everything here and now. But if the media is going to use the Hamas numbers, then they need to point out that, clearly Hamas has an interest in inflating the numbers and not giving accurate information. At the same time, if you look at Al Jazeera, there's a pro-Israel blog that did an analysis of Al Jazeera's names and numbers and still found that most of the people being killed are males that are either teenagers or in their 20s, which is the right gender and age to be a combatant, to be somebody who's working with Hamas. Even the inflated numbers are showing that Israel is not just targeting civilians, that they're targeting people who are fighting against Israel.
I don't know. The question of precisely how many people were killed, it's clear that a lot of people were killed in Gaza, and it might be discrepancies of a few hundred, which I'm not belittling that, but it's obvious that there are a lot of people in Gaza that are being killed. I think that the real question is, the real controversy is, how many of those can be considered to be combatants or terrorists that were killed? And that's where the real issue lies. And I think that there has been a concerted effort, at least that's what the IDF has told me, the IDF spokesman has told me, that there's been a concerted effort to cover up the fact that a lot of these people who were killed were in fact militants, were in fact terrorists. So that's the critical thing here. So I think that that's what investigation should lead to. It should lead to trying to discover precisely how many of the people that were killed can be considered to be terrorists.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you both for joining us, and I hope that all of you join us in our next episode.